So Priti Patel says she's going to stop 100% of the migrant crossings. How soon do you think that's going to happen?
I doubt whether it will happen. It's yet another example. We've talked about this many, many times and many, many issues that it's all hot air and rhetoric. You see some of the examples of what's happened in COP, the flipping around and various things on COVID. It's now the same here. Now, immigration is just another example of whereby we end up having knee-jerk reactions to serious problems rather than looking at the problem in the round and saying, well, okay, what is the cost benefit analysis of this? How do we provide solutions that actually work and bring sides together? But this is another example of yet another empty rhetoric, knee-jerk reaction that I'm not sure will take place. Now, in terms of immigration, we need to separate out in terms of what the need and the capacity is in this country. I think most people would recognize that if they're really honest with themselves. But at the moment, we just have a government who are patching together so-called rhetoric deals with the French, but there's no solutions underneath that.
Well, ironically, Priti Patel was due to go to France to meet her counterpart, the Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin, and she had to cancel that because of the Liverpool bombing. Now, we don't know yet whether or not the Liverpool bomber was, in fact, a dinghy crosser, came across the channel in a migrant dinghy, but there are suggestions that he might have been. But what it does bring into sharp focus is we didn't know anything about this guy. He turned out to be very dangerous. And the migrants are coming across the channel right now at the rate of about 1,000 a day. And we don't know anything about most of them because they have a habit of throwing their documents into the English Channel. So we have, I would suggest, James, a massive national security crisis here.
Yes, I agree. And yet it was interesting the other night when Boris Johnson was doing his press conference, was talking about that almost every question from our media was about the sleaze scandal, which is an issue, but no question was about immigration. I'm incredibly frustrated by this debate. You know, I'm pro-migration, but it has to be migration where everyone benefits. So they are economic migrants from arrival through to structures with employment in terms of benefiting their own lives and benefiting society. It's a good thing. There's a net gain from that. But we're not looking at this debate in the round. And so if you look at the example of what happened in Liverpool, where again, what happens is there's a knee-jerk reaction. Most of our media aren't then addressing it with the government. And the government, not just this government, but governments going back decades, are not coming up with a grown-up solution that benefits society to immigration. And I say that as someone who's very, very pro benefits of migration.
Yeah, some years ago, when Australia was suffering from a similar problem of migrants coming over from Indonesia and landing on their North Shore, they had a massive problem. And what the Australians did, I mean, admittedly, they had the convenience of an island they could put all the asylum seekers on to process them. But what they said, they put out the message, if you try to get into our country without documents, storming the beaches on your dinghies and your makeshift vessels, the fact that you did that means that your application for asylum will automatically fail. Why is it we can't do that? Because we need a deterrent. These people are not being deterred. This guy, Swealmeen, the Liverpool bomber, he applied for asylum first in 2014, has been appealing against rejection ever since, was living in special accommodation for asylum seekers. The process seems to go on forever. So basically, if you apply for asylum in this country, it's almost a free ticket to stay here permanently. We need a deterrent, don't we?
It's not even just a deterrent, Kevin. What we need is a proper system of processing. There's a lot of benefits are said about migration, especially if government are working with business to provide opportunities and apprenticeships and new businesses grow and provide communities with new jobs and so on. But there isn't even a process in terms of arrival about the structure of immigration. That has to take place, and it's been swept under the carpet, not just by this government, but by numerous governments for far too long. And yet what we have is this knee-jerk debate on either side about, in terms of what's happening in the Channel, what's happening in communities without structure and so on. And actually what we need is to take a step back, have a national conversation about how does this work for everyone. And I would suggest that rather than the Home Office taking care of immigration, what we need is a separate department. It's about immigration and work department. So there is an infrastructure right from the beginning where businesses are working with government to provide opportunities for economic migrants right from the start, which will benefit society. But at the moment, the problem keeps continuing because it's either under the auspice of the Home Office, or it's aspects about, individuals are coming in without the right approvals. And we end up in a situation whereby further down the tracks, people are either slipping through or they're not getting enough employment structures, and the whole thing ends up a mess. And this is not just a problem with this government, it goes back decades.
And there's a lot of impulse to blame the French, and quite rightly too. They're not doing very much to stop these migrants and these people smugglers getting onto the channel and making their crossings. We've given them over 50 million quid, which I think they just banked and just run off and not done anything. So yes, the French need to step up to the plate and raise their game. There's no doubt about that. But as soon as these migrants get onto the channel, and please God that they make it across, because it's going to get very dangerous in the next few months. So far, the winter doesn't seem to be deterring them. A world record last Thursday, I think it was, 1,200 in a single stormy day. So they're going to carry on coming over in the winter. So yes, the French need to do something. We need to persuade them to do something, but also we have to stop being quite so welcoming. We need to do something to deter these people, to say to them, you will not be welcome with open arms, you will not be put in a coach and taken to a nice hotel. I mean, for God's sake, we don't know anything about these people. The first thing we do, we take them to a hotel from which they're totally free to just walk out of, and many of them do, and we never hear of them again. This is just a useless system, isn't it?
It is a useless system, and in terms of from the point of arrival, that's when the problem starts. So therefore, what we have to do is we kind of root and branch this, Kevin. So what we have to do is make sure there is a verification and registration process. There also has to be a step beyond that, as I said before, where we're giving migrants the opportunity to flourish in this country that's beneficial to society, and that has to structure across employment as well. Well, I think personally, and we might differ on this, Kevin, I think we have a moral obligation to take on refugees who are fleeing tyranny. It's something that's been part of the fabric of our country.
But from France, James.
We've also provided...
From France. I mean, yes, totally agree. No. If people are genuinely fleeing war and torture, yes, any decent country has a moral obligation to offer them refuge. But these people are picking and choosing their country, aren't they? They're actually escaping from France, which last time I looked doesn't have much of a reputation for war and torture.
Yes, but part of the problem, Kevin, is back to what I've said before, is we don't have the infrastructures in place. We don't have the infrastructures in place in terms of what happens when migrants arrive for whatever reason, whether it's to flee tyranny, whether it's for economic benefit, whether it's for the wrong reasons. What we need is basically we need a separate government department that's done properly with the right minds to provide the right solutions on this. From the moment they arrive, they're integrating into society, and that has to come from employment, has to come from registration into the right healthcare practices, schools, or whatever. And that has to be a collaboration that will take quite a long time to be sort of justifiable in terms of how it works, rather than what happens at the moment, where the same problems keeps happening over and over again, where we are not on top of immigration. Now, I say this as someone who's very pro-immigration, but what I want is immigration to flourish in this country, and communities and society to flourish alongside that. And that has to happen with a proper approach from verification onwards into employment beyond the point of arrival. And we're still miles off that. And that has been going back a long time. So these discussions will continue to happen over and over again until we get a fully integrated approach to this. Yeah. At the moment, there isn't, and that causes knee-jerk reactions on each side.
Yeah, I mean, Priti Patel needs to sit down with some people, bang some heads together, and start to put together a kind of reception system that works, because our current reception system is basically just say, well, you made it here, good luck, here's a few quid, here's somewhere to live, if you want to leave, off you go, we'll never see you again. It's just not joined up thinking at the moment, is it?
Completely, but that causes the divisions in the debate about immigration because there isn't that structure in place. If there was a proper structure in place from the point of arrival, then the heat in the argument would dissipate because there's a proper structure in place. At the moment, there isn't. And therefore, that's what's causing the sort of extreme reactions. Some of it is justifiable, actually, because there isn't this process in place. And it's not just on this issue as well. It's on so many of the big issues today. We have governments that are failing us because they're doing paper over the crack solutions rather than root and branching it from all aspects to make the problem go away over time. And these things are not quick fix solutions. They do take time. And at the moment, governments, they don't seem to be interested in the long term. They're literally papering over the cracks.
Agreed. And the one thing I think we can guarantee is that Priti Patel is a million miles away from her pledge to stop 100% of the migrant crossings. She's nowhere near that. And she needs to sort of think, I think, before she keeps making these big promises that she never keeps. Good to talk to you, James, as always. Thank you so much for your time.